with hosts John Engel and Roberto Cabrera. Over the next hour, you're going to learn some insider knowledge that will help you overcome and strategize in the cutthroat world of real estate. Now, here are your hosts, John and Roberto.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Boroughs Burbs, episode 128, season 4. We were going to call this the boat show, but I didn't think that was going to do it justice. Here we are on location in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to do the luxury yachting show. And I have two very special guests. But before I introduce them, I want to introduce my co-host in world headquarters, New York.
Upper West Side of Manhattan. Good to see you, everybody.
And what's your name?
Roberto Cabrera.
Okay, thank you. Are you excited as excited as I am about doing a show on location in Fort Lauderdale, the stuff of legends?
I am. I'm personally just fascinated by the word yacht.
Yacht. Okay. So in this show, Roberto, we're going to try and do a couple of things. Usually it's a real estate show. And so I do want to understand yachts, and I want to understand where they fit in to somebody's real estate portfolio, how we think about real estate is somewhat how we think about yachts and how we think about location. And since I would say I've been coming here since the 80s, Fort Lauderdale has been Mecca for yachts and super yachts. Eventually, all super yachts find their way to Fort Lauderdale. I would say more so than any other place in America, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's the yachting capital of the world.
So we went
Is that true? That's really true?
It is. It absolutely is. We're gonna school you, Roberto. So that's why we needed two very special guests in order to get this show done right. We have Julie Jones, Elliman agent, expert for how long in Fort Lauderdale?
So for around 20 years, I have specialized in luxury real estate here in Fort Lauderdale, particularly deep water properties and oceanfront. And that's how I got to meet Bob Denison and the Denison family, and to have a complete education about super yachts and what truly makes Fort Lauderdale the yachting capital of the world.
I went fishing last night, and we went from in the Palm Beach area, and I could tell when the yachts in front of the waterfront properties got bigger. I knew. So as you move along the waterfront, as the yachts get bigger, parked out in front, you realize you're in a higher rent district. So Bob, tell us about the yachts and in fact the super yachts.
Yeah, so I'm a Fort Lauderdale kid, by the way. So there's going to be a lot of like local Fort Lauderdale kid propaganda, suffocating exaggerations about Fort Lauderdale being the best place in the world. But I think it is true. Fort Lauderdale is called the yachting capital of the world. I'm pretty sure we gave ourselves that nickname. Is that allowed? We were like the kid in high school that was like, you can call me big guy or something. But it is a result of more yachts being on the water in Fort Lauderdale than any other location, any other city in the entire world by a significant magnitude. And that's because of the amount of waterways. There's about 300 miles of it in Fort Lauderdale with a lot of man-made canals and there's also just great people here. So a lot of not only yacht brokers like myself that wear yellow pants and try to look cool at boat shows, but a lot of great service providers and marinas. So if you have a yacht, no matter what the size or a boat, and you need something fixed, Fort Lauderdale is kind of the place to do that.
And Bob, I have a question for you because there's huge confusion about this. At what point does a boat become a yacht, and at what length does it then become a super yacht? So you can educate us on this, please.
So there's no real official kind of, this is it. I mean, there are some government. So for instance, a yacht technically is 24 meters and above. It's a little bit of an archaic measuring stick, but it is. So 24 meters is about 80 feet. It is now regarded to be bigger than that. And when I say regarded by who, how much that person has had to drink at the bar, who are they trying to impress? Like, it really depends on the last boat days. It's just a weird non-defined thing, but it's kind of like you go from a category of boats to yachts to mega yachts to super yachts and then giga yachts, and the threshold of where that begins and ends is not defined, except for that 24-meter and above is technically a yacht.
And what price point are they roughly? Do they range from, can you give us a breakdown as to the $1 million ratings for these different yachts, so that the viewers this afternoon can actually understand the wealth that flows through our canals and the intercoastal here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, and I'm going to mention some of these kind of size brackets and how much, and it starts to sound a little crazy. And I just wanted to pull up, I was going to do this later, but I'll do it now. When you hear a number, so like a 40-foot something is going to cost around $1 million new. The interesting thing about yacht ownership and boat ownership is that there is that money, of course, that's spent constructing the yacht and jobs created and all that stuff. But about somewhere between 10 to 13% of the value of that yacht is spent locally in those waterways. So it's a very significant economic driver of just a lot of great things in local communities that host these yachts. So about 40 foot, 45 feet is about $1 million. You go up to 50, 60 feet, you can get up to $2.5 million. And by the way, I'm kind of using the length overall, but a lot of times people miss just the overall volume of the yacht and the depth and the width of it as well. So it starts to really, really escalate and get a lot more expensive, up to 30, 40, $50 million. And it really isn't just the length and the size of it, but also the amenities and the technology that goes into the larger yachts. There is, and for instance, if you go up to about 100 feet, you're looking somewhere around, 16 to $20 million. And again, a lot of this stuff depends on where you're building it. But just to give you an idea of the overall kind of like economics of this thing, it's not just the purchase of the yacht, it's all the other stuff that goes with it. The AC, the crew that's aboard a yacht. We're proud as an industry of contributing a lot to the local economies.
Is it fair to say a 200-foot yacht is more than twice as big as a 100-foot yacht? When you talk about volume,
yes.
They get wider, they get deeper when they get longer, and they get taller.
Yep, exactly. So in real estate, and it's a little confusing, especially for somebody that hasn't owned a yacht before, you want to kind of measure it by something that you can grab. Like when we're shopping for a house, my wife and I, of course, we're looking at square footage and we're looking at how big the lot is. It's very defined. In a yacht, we don't measure things by square feet. It's by gross volume, and it sort of represents the space of the yacht. There has been conversation, by the way, about going to a square footage kind of measuring stick. But the easiest and funnest way is still just saying a 100-foot yacht is this much money.
And that's so important. It has such a bearing when somebody owns a yacht. For me, I need to know the length. I need to know the draft, and I need to know the beam to match it to our waterways here, because it's an expensive mistake if you can't dock your house behind your waterfront property. And Bob, I know you've been super busy recently because you've just come off the Miami boat show. So what can you tell us about the Miami show?
Miami show was great. So again, I'm a South Florida kid. I love the local South Florida shows. There's 3 big shows down here. Fort Lauderdale is kind of like our Super Bowl. And then we have Miami and Palm Beach. And it's interesting that 3 of the biggest shows in the world all happen kind of.
Wait, say that again, because I think we need to reinforce that. The Super Bowl is Fort Lauderdale, and the lesser shows are Miami and Palm Beach.
This is where I can start sounding obnoxious, because I have this like chip on my shoulder that Fort Lauderdale is cooler than Miami.
It's true. It's not obnoxious if it's true.
It is true.
And so and it reinforces that point of the Mecca. If you are a boater, and this has been true since I'd say the 1960s, maybe earlier, you are 3rd generation. So I'm going to ask you about this. At least since the 60s, this has been the Mecca for boating. And what I'm trying to understand is, how has it remained the Mecca? I mean, it's one thing to say, yeah, we have a lot of boats. But on my way in here, I noticed 2 of the most prestigious names in yachting, Bertram and Beneteau, have headquarters or right across the street from you. So all of the brain trust is located here as well.
Yep. So it's the headquarters for a lot of firms, a lot of global firms. It is very much the place to go. Again, I mentioned just getting your boat improved or refit or fixed in any way. And then it's also what Julie does with selling homes to people that own a boat. It really is one of the only places where you have at that scale a place to keep your boat behind your house. And Julie can tell you that. And sometimes there's properties that have 50 foot of dockage, and that limits kind of what size, going up to kind of point lots that have dockage the whole way around and in excess of 600 feet. The other thing about Fort Lauderdale that I love, and I think it's worth mentioning, that I think is a big reason why we continue to be a place that people bring their boats, is its proximity to the Bahamas and the Florida Keys. Because on a boat, you want to go do stuff. I'm here in California right now. One of the struggles California has as a state, with incredible coastline, awesome weather, they don't have the places like the Bahamas or the Exumas in the Bahamas, and using it as a launching pad to go to Key Largo or Key West. So I think that's one of the reasons that Fort Lauderdale remains so relevant.
And actually, Bob, to that point, I thought of you, but because at Christmas we went to visit Oil Nut Bay in the British Virgin Islands, and previously when we were in St. Kitts, they are building like a mega yacht marina there, which was exactly about a year ago. You said to me, you know, Julie, the islands are going to really start coming alive with development of marinas and luxury homes to go with them. So we're actually starting to see that. And I think you also mentioned to me, Bob, that a lot of the yacht owners are staying in the islands now, as opposed to maybe going to the Mediterranean. And when we were originally going to be on a yacht this afternoon, but you mentioned to me that so many of the Fort Lauderdale boats are in the Bahamas currently.
Correct. Yeah, there was really, we saw a major swelling of people that own yachts and charter yachts during COVID, sort of descend upon the Bahamas, because there was much more clarity on where you could cruise, and the Med was essentially shut down. And a lot of people stayed. A lot of people sort of discovered the Bahamas, and to your point, Julie, also parts of the Caribbean like St. Thomas, St. Bart's. And you had a lot of Europeans coming over here to do that. And of course, Americans that may have gone to the Med stuck around here. And it is really exploding in terms of development, which is really important, because the global order book of yachts right now, again, I'll use that term, of 24 meters and above, sits at 1,000. So right now there's 1,000 yachts being constructed, and they need somewhere to go. So all of that development that you're talking about, Julie, in the Caribbean and the Bahamas is going to be really, really, really important for yacht ownership experience.
Can those get absorbed? All of those, does it affect? I mean, now we're talking supply and demand. That seems to be a decent amount of production, when I would think that this is an asset class that you have your primary house, you buy your second house, maybe your third house, you buy a bunch of cars, and then maybe where does this fall in relation to, do you buy a plane or do you buy a yacht? Like where does this fall? I would imagine this is the uberest of luxury items.
Yeah, it's a great question. We have a lot of clients that treat their yacht like their second home. And I really don't want to say this in front of Julie, but there are some clients that struggle between this decision of, should I have a second home in Fort Lauderdale? I'm living in New York or California, or should I buy a yacht? Or for that matter, it could compete with a third home. It could compete with the decision to buy a plane. But it really depends on the family. It really depends on the use of the yacht, whether you're going to be using it to entertain clients, whether it's a family retreat kind of a thing. But it usually falls in there somewhere on the second, third home kind of decision that a family or a family office would make.
But the good news is, for me, Bob, that as the marinas fill up and they become more expensive, for some of the yacht owners, it's very frustrating. They come into town, they want to enjoy Fort Lauderdale, but they can't find a dock. The number of calls I get from boat captains wanting to use the dockage at my listings seems to have increased radically over the last 3 or 4 years. And in that instance, they will often call and say, you know what, Julie, I don't care about the house, but what I care about is being able to dock my Westport behind it. And it's a lot of fun showing yachting families property, because invariably you open the front door and the guys or girls walk straight out to the dock edge.
Yeah.
And that's the main priority to them. So it's a shifting trend for sure.
And
So I do get a good piece of the pie as well.
yeah, no, and to your point, Julie, they so much go hand in hand because I have to be careful how I say this, but it's like a yacht behind a house can truly be kind of the ultimate accessory or like a jewel on the. It's like a very neat, pretty thing to look at, as opposed to some other things that you can put behind your house. It's a very neat, very cool thing to have that doesn't necessarily block a view. And here in Fort Lauderdale, we have a lot of canals, so the house is looking directly across at your neighbor, and a boat can kind of provide like a very cool hedge. So it is they go hand in hand for sure. And we see, to Julie's point, a lot of captains, a lot of owners that are buying properties just for their boat.
It's a pretty expensive hedge.
It can be. It can be. I know the house across from where I live has a sunseeker that virtually blocks the entire house. I look at the whole of the sunseeker, and I often joke, I wonder how they actually get it. It's a 90-foot sunseeker, how they actually get it down the canal and into position. So, and it's fascinating watching these big yachts maneuver the waterways is a treat in itself.
Can you give me a little perspective on the history of, so yachting was, I mean, the way I see it, and I know nothing, is that it was really something that was in the Mediterranean. It was a Greek thing, whatever, in the 40s and 50s. And then, you know, slowly some of the wealth started coming to the United States and they started finding these pockets here. Is that how it grew across? I mean, what is the history, a little bit of the culture of it?
Yeah, so I think you're correct there with you immediately when you think of super yachts back in the heyday of that era. The Greek owners, the Greek yachts were certainly some of the biggest and most impressive. I would argue that America, in some ways, was a little bit ahead, and it's you know, depends on how you time that. But I think of people like Vanderbilt, and I think of just a number of families in the Gilded Age did a lot of yacht construction here in America. That point was big enough to cross an ocean. And we as Americans very much should pride ourselves, and we continue to be leaders in terms of yacht ownership. So when you look at even now, the number of yacht owners that exist, the U.S. and the American yacht buying community has ranked #1 for decades and decades by a long shot. So a quarter of all yachts owned in the world are owned by Americans.
And that's a great statistic. Bob, are you finding that the wealth is getting younger as well? You know, I've noticed that when we sell our luxury real estate, either I'm getting older or they're getting younger. I can't decide, but somewhere between the two. Are you finding the yacht owners are getting younger?
A little bit, yeah. Our core clientele is definitely still going to be, you know, not in their 20s or 30s. We are seeing a lot of children that grew up yachting, and it's one of those really cool things where once you get that bug and you experience a day, and it's especially, I love random Tuesdays when you're in the Exumas on a boat. It doesn't matter how big it is. It is a really like pure special time with not only the water around you and the people you're with, but it's a hard thing to let go of. So we're seeing a lot of children of clients that are jumping into the game. What's interesting and a little bit scary for us as an industry is the shared consumption model is definitely going to cause a little bit of disruption in terms of, you know, clients in their 20s and 30s and 40s, perhaps just wanting to charter and not wanting yacht ownership, or perhaps they'll do a fractional kind of thing. But long answer short to your question, Julie, yes, some younger clients are entering into our market, but they're behaving a little bit differently.
So I'm wondering what the sequence of events is. Once I've sold, my ship has come in, as they say, and I've made my fortune. Do I start by going and saying, find me a house, Julie, with a waterfront, and you know, find me a great place in Fort Lauderdale in South Florida, and invariably you'll show them waterfront, and they'll say, "Oh, what can I put there?" And then they come talk to you, Bob, and you say, "Oh, well, you're limited to 50 feet, so because that's the size of your dock, you're going to have to buy a bigger dock with Julie if you want a bigger boat." So once they do that, do they then say, "Okay, where can I take it?" Oh, I can. If I have a small boat, that 50-footer I just mentioned, I can go to the Bahamas. But if I got a bigger boat, say the 100-foot honeypot that you're selling, the advantage is I can go further. And so where does the world open up for me
That's a great question.
when I go bigger? And if I get bigger, can Julie find me a bigger dock?
Right. So
Can you find them any?
Oh, yes, pretty much, you know, obviously the Rolls-Royce of waterfront property are the point residences, and Bob is a point residence owner where you have multi-yacht dockage, or you have mega yacht dockage, and you still have a view. And
Is that a gated community?
not so much the gated communities. We're pretty restricted on our gated deep water communities, but it's all governed by the length and the draft and the beam of the boat. But typically, the love affair with yachting that Denison satisfied, most of the yachtsmen, they buy the boat. And then they'll have an idea, because the internet has changed both of our industries. They'll have an idea of what they're seeking in terms of the dock accommodations. And there's a lot that goes into it, which is why I'm so grateful for the education I've had from Bob and Denison about the different yachts and what will work behind the different properties.
So some start with falling in love with a boat they saw online, and then they have to match it with a property and a place to keep it. Or some will find a property they love or a community they want to be in with you, and then Bob will tell them what they can have and what they can't have.
And I think there's truth to that, right, Bob?
yeah, for sure. What's really interesting to me are people that buy waterfront properties that have never boated before, and somebody will say to them, "Why don't you put a boat back there?" So they say, "Oh, I can fit a 60-foot boat back here." They'll buy something around that size, and then what's happened? This has happened very specifically to some of our clients. They will say, "Oh my gosh, I love this. My kids love it. They're not thinking about their iPads. We're hanging out together in a totally cool, real way. I need to get a bigger boat." And that might result in them selling their house, buying another house. So there's two transactions. And then of course for the yacht broker, it's great because then you're selling that boat and you're buying a bigger one. And that is a very soft sell, like just get people on board and the rest kind of takes over. But what we're seeing a lot of movement up, or movement to bigger waterfront properties to take care of that. I need a bigger boat mentality.
In the process of getting a bigger boat, in the process of getting a bigger boat, there's obviously a resale market, right? How substantial, like if I'm coming in, how is the resale market different from the new construction market? Like, what are the different dynamics and considerations there?
So the real estate brokerage market is extremely similar the yacht brokerage market is very similar in so many ways. So for instance, for us on the marketing front, one of our strengths, I think, is that we have paid attention to the real estate market on the marketing front for 20 years. So I'm constantly on Inman. I'm looking at strategies of real estate brokers and applying them. One of the things that is consistent is the process of a transaction. It's not identical for sure. Our commissions are different. The way that kind of takes place is different. But essentially, a seller of a yacht, very much like a seller of a property, will find a yacht broker that they love, a yacht broker that they trust, and they will and trust that broker to sell their yacht, just like a great realtor would sell a house.
Oh, that's evident.
Sorry, but your neighborhood is not just South Florida. Your competition is California, everywhere, right? It's global.
Yeah, so we have so that's why I'm in California right now, because we're doing a West Coast sales training tomorrow. So there is a lot of in each market, of course, is totally different. But it's very much a global market. The market of boats and yachts in California is radically different than in Florida. But for the most part, the process is exactly the same.
And Bob, you also have brokerages in Monaco and London, your brokerage relationships. So you're truly, truly global. And I think to Bob's point, it becomes, yachting is such a lifestyle here in Fort Lauderdale, because we have a climate that enables us to get, because it's warm, even if it's raining, it's liquid sunshine. So we still go out on our boats. And to Bob's point, the lifestyle becomes all encompassing, because it is somewhere where you can take your family and everybody can sit down. You know, we chartered a catamaran at Christmas and over the New Year, and it's just so good to get out on the water and to not constantly be on your phone and to actually have conversations and sit down and have meals together. So I take a lot of pleasure watching my customers, the families, getting involved in their yachting life, and they join the yacht club and they're out on the water and they meet friends. And I know, Denison, Bob, you've hosted some great regattas and get-togethers over the years where you pull all of your customers together. And we actually bought a boat from Denison. And now I look at it and I'm frustrated because I'm like, okay, well, where can we take it? And because it's a center console, which is amazing to navigate, to go to the restaurants here and to navigate the waterways, but I don't want to sleep on it if we take it over to Valentine's. So the next boat that we are looking for is a Horizon catamaran. And I'm noticing, Bob, that the catamaran market is growing here locally as well. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's for sure the hottest, fastest growing segment of the yachting world is the cat. So, and I think everybody knows what a catamaran is, but if you don't,
Is that
it's
sail power or both?
both. And there's a lot of efficiencies and, of course, spacing. So you have two hulls, or sometimes three, and it just broadens the entire platform of a boat. And it really, truly is just such a frantic buying kind of attitude right now with people that have had a day or two on board of a friend's catamaran and decided I need to get one of those. And one of the challenges of that, and it kind of ties back into the real estate part of the conversation, is there is not a lot of new marina developments that are occurring right now in the U.S. And it sort of depends by state by state, but there's not a lot of infrastructure being built out. Those that are is very that happens a few dozen at a time, at least here in the state of Florida. And you have a big push to make new dockage and new kind of marina arrangements for catamarans and for multi-hulls. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why people are looking at homes, because the catamaran dockage thing can be very expensive, and a home is a perfect place to keep a catamaran because you usually have enough space for the width of the boat.
So I think for people who are not boaters, I think the key advantage that you're talking about is when God made deep water ports, they all got sold off and used up in the 100 years ago. And so what you're talking about is, as we've run out of deep water ports, now we're making more shallow ports. And the only kind of boat that can maneuver in shallow water is often a catamaran. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate statement. And the other part of it on the marina development side is we're seeing a lot of best use cases for a big chunk of a piece of dirt somewhere on the water. Oftentimes, you're seeing marinas get knocked down and erecting big giant condominiums. So you're seeing less marinas exist because of that, less being developed. And to your point, it's pushing a lot of cruising grounds to have this shallower water experience, which is better on a catamaran because they draw less water.
So you're saying that, are any of your customers who have, say, a 200-foot yacht saying, I'm really limited in the places I can take it, so I want you to sell my 200-foot yacht and find me a catamaran so that I can open up more Caribbean islands to go visit, more of the Bahamas I can visit, because not many ports can accommodate a 200-foot boat. Roberto goes sometimes to St. Bart's, and that's a classic example where if you want to use if you're a time-starved billionaire or a celebrity and you only have very little amount of time to use your boat and enjoy your boat, then you probably want to use it in a place like St. Bart's in the winter. And you want to be there during the high season, and you want to be right in the middle of the scene. And St. Bart's Harbor, last I checked, could only accommodate about 12 of these mega yachts, right, Roberto? I mean,
Yeah, it's not that big.
And that hasn't changed in the 20 years since I used to go to St. Bart's. I mean, St. Bart's Harbor is not any bigger, and they're not accommodating they're not making more docks there.
And what I also heard is that Roberto has the taste of a billionaire. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what places like St. Bart's do now, you're right, there's very limited marina space, but a lot of yachts, and this is really neat to see. You'll see if you Google photographs of super yachts in St. Bart's at New Year's Eve, they'll actually be mooring outside the harbor there or inside and it's a really neat kind of spectacle of the who's who of the yachting world. It's a really special place.
But that phenomenon is not happening here in Fort Lauderdale. You don't have people in the waiting room, as it were. There's enough room for all of them here, and that's what's special about Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, there are some mooring fields, but yeah, for the most part, we have enough space. Sorry, Julie, go ahead.
No, and I think to that point, maybe, Bob, can you give us an idea if somebody owns an 80-foot yacht, what are they paying per month if they want to dock there for marina charges? Because I know that a handful of my customers, they purchased homes because they've got tired of paying marina charges. So just to put it in people's perspective, I have an 80-foot yacht. What am I going to expect to pay on a monthly basis for a decent marina?
Yeah, and so I mean, there's a little bit of difference between in season and out of season, but very, very easily, if you have an 80-foot yacht, you need to plan for, stomach for, talk to your spouse, loved one, partner about spending somewhere around $6,500 to $7,000 a month on just the dock space for that boat.
Which has driven a lot of people to home ownership here, which is great for sure. And Bob,
that's not bad. That's
what I was thinking. I was thinking that's not bad. To park an SUV on Fifth Avenue is like $2,500 a month.
Yeah, I'm thinking that parking spot in St. Bart's is nowhere near $7,000 a month, right? That's got to be $7,000 a day in high season.
Yeah, that'll be a lot more. But again, those are usually the boats in St. Bart's, that we're talking about are super yachts that they're going to be pushing, in the 60, 70 meter size of things. But yeah, so and you go radically up because there's less dock space for a 200-foot boat than there is for an 80-foot boat.
Let's talk about the international market for a moment for both of you. It occurs to me that with yachting, I can get to Capri, I can get to Positano, I can get to Menorca, an island off the coast of Spain. So does this, do you find that a disproportionately high number of your customers are interested in making the trip back and forth and want to explore beyond just going to the Caribbean?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually not a fun trip to take if you cross an ocean. So most of the time, unless you have an owner that just wants to check something off their bucket list, which of course happens, usually the crew kind of takes that trip for you and then you meet the boat there. But we are seeing, and by the way, we call it the milk run on the charter front. There's a huge, heavy demand, a lot of inventory in the Med for charter yachts. And of course, here in the Caribbean that we just talked about, we are seeing new cruising grounds. To your point, we're looking at Alaska, Antarctica, Asia, where there's a lot of people that say, you know what, I've done the Med 4 or 5 times. I've done the Bahamas my whole life. I want to go see some penguins. So there is an uptick in demand there. And it very much falls under that adventure, exciting, once in a lifetime type of a week that some people desire. And a lot of those places are only accessible on a boat or a yacht.
How big a boat do you need to cross the Atlantic? Does it need to be a certain size? Do you have to be at 80 feet to comfortably?
It sort of depends. So there's smaller sailboats that can cross for obvious reasons because they don't have a limitation on range. The wind's going to propel them, and they're deep, and they're sort of built for blue water. So you can cross an ocean on a 50-foot sailboat that's well built. Usually, what happens on a yacht of up to, let's say, 160 feet is you can actually put it on another ship, and that ship will take the boat across for you. A lot depends on the design of the boat. Is it full displacement, fuel range and all that stuff? But most of the time boats are going over on a ship. If you Google something like Dockwise, it'll show you a really cool picture of the boats being put onto these big ships and they cross the ocean.
So if you have a client in Fort Lauderdale and he says, look, I want this thing, I want to take it to Ibiza. How much lead time do they need for that thing to get there for them to just go visit?
A few months.
A few months.
Oh yeah. Oh, wow. So I'm talking about in terms of scheduling a ship to take you over there. In terms of if you said I want to go to Ibiza like tomorrow, it would be really hard to do because there would be at least a few weeks of provisioning and making sure that the crew's good. Even if the owners aren't on board, there's a lot that goes into preparing a yacht or a ship for crossing an ocean. There's a lot of things on the safety front that are really, you know, as you would imagine, taken pretty seriously. So if you said, I don't care, I'm Roberto, and I have to get over there, I would say minimum you'd be looking at 2 weeks of just prep, and you'd usually want to give the crew a heck of a lot more time than that.
So you mentioned earlier that the largest percentage of your buyers are American, and I wanted to find out whether that's changing over the last 20 years, whether you're finding the international buyer has discovered yachting and likes it. And I want to contrast that or find out whether that's also true for Julie, whether the international buyer is back and looking at Fort Lauderdale.
I think that this year we're probably going to see an increase in international transactions. You know, obviously there are some considerations, currency fluctuations, accessibility, but I'm confident that this year we'll probably see more international transactions than last year. I actually yesterday was showing oceanfront properties with some buyers that I'm working with from Ontario, and the Canadians love the oceanfront here, and then they dip their toe in the water with the boating, right, Bob? Because they love to be here when it's cold in Canada. So I do think that we will see an uptick in international trans this year. And I think, Bob, for you, Miami's a very international show, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have, as much as and I'll pause on my Fort Lauderdale is the best city of all time rhetoric for a second. We really just benefit from our proximity to Miami and the internationalness of Miami. Our buyers are, again, primarily American or foreign nationals that live here. I think when you look at the entirety of the industry, and people do reports on this, the U.S., as I mentioned, is about a quarter, and then the second most significant yacht ownership nationality is actually Russian. And there's obviously been a big disruption in that. They are sort of falling in terms of position. There very likely will be number 3 next year behind Greece and Turkey. But we are seeing a lot of American buyers that are, you know, I would say for our firm, we're looking at somewhere around 90% of the people that we're talking to have an American passport in their pocket.
What about the Aussies and the Asians? And I mean, is that coming up?
Yeah, the Australians are always in the top 10. I think I'd have to look at my notes. I think there's somewhere around 7 or 8 this year, which is pretty significant in terms of when you look at, you know, if you want to look at per capita yacht ownership, they would be way up there. They're obviously a traditionally a very seafaring, ocean-loving nation. The Asian market, especially when you're looking at China, there's not a ton of activity for political reasons, I think. Also, there's not a lot of infrastructure there in China. So when they're thinking of very cool lifestyle, like neat things to do, like yachting isn't something that occurs to them, I don't believe as much as it does people from countries that have that kind of infrastructure and experience. But I think it will be coming up, but I think we're looking at, you know, 15, 20 years. It's not anytime soon. China isn't even in the top 10.
When Roberto, with his expensive taste, says, I'm in the market and I want a boat and I want to go to Ibiza and I want to go to St. Bart's and I'm in, and he decides and he starts looking on the internet for that boat and he starts falling in love with boats and picking up. Where's Roberto going to get hurt trying to do this by himself?
Great question.
Yeah, I think it's very much like navigating a large home purchase by yourself. There's a lot of I think it was a Realtor Association survey that was done. I always reference it when I'm training our guys in terms of, there was a survey that the association put out a while ago about what are the most important things to a buyer. And so the first 2 were both knowledge. The first one was knowledge of the process. It's like, who do I talk to? How does this work? Who's the best, you know, in terms of insurance, title? It was all the kind of the guts of the process, the deal. And the other one was knowledge of the product or the market. So, you know, your neighborhood and just sort of having insight into the market. And I think the same is true here. If you go at it by yourself, there is a risk that you could not only pick the wrong boat, but also attach yourself to the wrong people that might make the transaction a lot more complicated, or yacht ownership experience a lot more complicated and expensive. Just like in a home purchase, the very important part of the process is the inspection. We call it survey and sea trial, where it's sort of like a hybrid thing of like a very intense home inspection and a car ride, like a sea trial, like you take the thing out. And you really want to make sure that day, and depending on the size of the yacht, it could be multiple days or 3 or 4 days. It's really important to make sure the right people are on board and that you have the right team by your side. I try to say that without sounding like an alarmist, because there has been a lot of chatter about people going at it alone, but the data shows in real estate too, I think there's actually an uptick in people using realtors on the buy side, which is sort of counterintuitive. But I think with the noise and all these different websites, the relational part of it is still the most important thing.
Do you find that your industry is actually, it's kind of a small world? Like you all kind of know each other a little bit, at least the big players, like who's dealing with what. And
oh yeah, even the small players. There's a lot of great boutique firms in our industry, and I would like to think a lot of large ones like ourselves. But I mean, we all know each other. There's an inherent amount of trust and goodwill. There's been people that have been doing this for decades and decades that do things the right way, and the do things the right way yacht brokers all know, love, and respect each other.
And how did you get into this?
So my grandparents.
I want you to really thump your chest a couple times here, because I'm not just sitting in like some strip mall, Roberto. You can't see that, but I'm sitting in this beautiful glass and steel headquarters of Denison Yachting, and they are a very big deal in this industry. So tell us what it means to be a big deal in this industry and why that allows you to service your clients at a much higher level.
Okay, this is the moment where I'm really hoping an ex-girlfriend will watch this at some point. But yeah, I'm a really big deal. By the way, the thing I can't take my eyes off of as you're bragging about our cool office is that cord hanging down from the TV. It's driving me crazy. But yeah, it's just, and that's not your fault. That's our fault, I think. But my grandparents moved down to Fort Lauderdale back in the 40s. They came down on their honeymoon, ended up buying a shipyard, and for about 50 years, they were responsible for building more yachts than anybody in the world. It was a brand I'm really proud of called Broward Marine. The year I graduated college, they decided to sell the company, which was a little bit heartbreaking. But we quickly pivoted to the brokerage and sales and charter part of the business. And I think it's probably a great thing for me. I was heartbroken in the beginning, but I quickly realized I don't have an engineer's mind. I would be a terrible yacht builder, and very likely would have failed miserably doing that. So I got really, really lucky.
Great. Wow.
What would a customer experience if they came in here? Why do we need a headquarters? I mean, it's not just the buying and selling of yachts, but it's being able to connect, I guess, with the people who maintain these yachts, where to store my yacht, getting a professional crew to take the yacht to where I want it to be. Are you involved in all facets of the business or just the brokerage?
Correct. Yeah. So the vision for the office, and there's a guy that is likely in that building right now. His name is Ben. His vision for it was his, not mine. And I'm glad that he had it, was to really have one place that clients could come and you can have a conversation with them about yacht ownership. You can go over like a P&L of what that looks like, not just dockage, but also insurance and crew wages and crew uniforms and all that stuff. And if you wanted to talk to our charter team, you could. We have a crew placement division where you can talk to someone like Jill about hiring the right captain. That's more of like a headhunter part of it. And of course, you can talk to a yacht broker about the market and the deals that are out there. So for us, it's less about a big, cool building, which I'm so excited that you said that, because I'm just real proud of it. But it's more just about the people that are there and enabling one single conversation to happen with a lot of great people in one building. And as we grew, and we have about 20 offices, it's harder and harder to do. Of course, things like Zoom help out a little bit, but there's nothing like being in the same room with somebody and trying to solve a complicated problem or a complicated purchase.
And so that's the cue for Joy to explain to me, who are the people, who are the agencies that matter in terms of trying to find yourself a waterfront home to store that boat? I mean, can I just go to Zillow and
You can certainly start on the internet platforms, and that's where we all spend our life, right? We're looking at Instagram, we're researching things. I mean,
but those platforms don't tell me anything
they
about
don't.
the boat aspect of
And
it.
to Bob's point, you need the expert to avoid, once you've bought that beautiful catamaran or Westport, or you're starting off like us and you have a center console. It's then you can go on Zillow and say, oh my goodness, look at all these waterfront homes. I'm going to be just fine.
But
And
it only draws 6 feet, so you can't
And
really store anything.
That's the reality, and sadly, and I work really hard to help my cooperating agents understand, because they'll call me and they'll say, well, Julie, the house is 100 feet of water, so of course my customer can fit his 100-foot yacht behind there. And I'm like, well, not necessarily, because we have to talk about setbacks, we have to talk about canal widths, we have to talk about canal depths, and do you have a boat captain who can go by the house to check it out to make sure it's going to be appropriate before your customer arrives in town? Because there's no way,
Can you do that for them, or do you hook up with Bob?
So
to
I
make sure
could,
it happens?
Bob and the Denison team have helped me, and actually coming in today, I actually have one of the brokers here, and we have a mutual customer who I've had about 5 real estate transactions, and Gary's sold him multiple boats over the years, originally from Ohio. So it is definitely a process. And to this point, I actually set up a website called docyourmegayacht.com. It has all of the canals. It's got the setbacks, whether they're 5 or 10 feet. It's got the canal widths. It's got the low tides. But having said that, there's always a caveat, right? Because if it's an older home and there has not been a boat dockage, you may need a dredge. Now, dredging falls into 2 categories. You may also need a new seawall, and you're going to need certain amps and certain electrical service. And the seawall regulations are changing in Fort Lauderdale. So to Bob's point, it is a minefield, but that's what makes it exciting. And that's how you establish yourself, from having that expertise and having the repeat customers and helping people along their journey. So for instance, my journey will start with the center console, hopefully go to a 60-foot catamaran. People will come to me, they'll buy their first waterfront home, and then they'll go to Bob, and Bob will sell them a bigger boat, and they'll need more dockage. So it is a highly relationship-driven business. And the similarities in marketing, I love to see the Denison marketing, because Bob is a pioneer. I have to do this little plug. For any of you who are thinking of venturing into waterfront real estate, or you're buying your first boat, you have to subscribe to Frank, because this magazine will tell you all the stories and all the happenings, and it's beautifully produced.
What is that called?
What is that called? This is called Frank. Bob, tell us about the magazine. Tell us about Frank Magazine.
Yeah, we're really proud of that, and Jennifer Peacock helps lead that. It's named after my grandfather. His name was Frank, obviously, and we also really value with our company sort of transparent, frank communication. So it kind of was a play on that. Yeah, it's just a collection of really fun things. Billy Springer is a great editor, and he puts together a good collection of hopefully very fun things to read that have something to do with yachting or the luxury experience.
Am I going to see this on the coffee tables of mega yachts?
Yes,
Around
every single mega yacht in the world will have one on their coffee table. Maybe
So
I'm
that-
exaggerating a little bit, but yeah.
And there'll be a new edition at the Palm Beach Boat Show, where I'm advertising my waterfront listing. So go by and see Bob and Jennifer and the team at the Palm Beach Boat Show, which is March 21st. Yeah, coming up quickly, right, Bob?
Yep,
Are we
in about a
ready
month.
for it? So
We
tell
are
me
ready for
something, the Palm Beach Boat Show, the range of boats that you have on display dollar-wise, just give us a rundown of what we can see in Palm Beach.
Anything I can afford, Bob?
Yes, because
You're always.
I watch your podcast and I've seen the books behind you, and that's a good reflection of a very wealthy man that needs a yacht. So the answer to that question is yes. We're going to have about 20 yachts on display, and they're going to be we don't know for sure yet, but I think we'll have most yachts over 80 feet that they're going to be there. If I had to add it up, I should know this, Julie, but if I was to add up all 20 yachts, we're probably looking at somewhere around, I don't know, $50-60 million worth of inventory. But the cool thing about a boat show is that, in our lineup is a pretty good representation of this. It's a neat place where you can go see a bunch of different stuff at the same time, as opposed to driving from marina to marina, getting stuck in traffic. It's a place where you can see not just our boats, but hundreds of others, a lot of different styles, and say, huh, that catamaran thing is pretty cool, or I want a boat that goes faster. I want something really deep and, how do you say the word, voluminous? I knew
Voluminous, yes.
Okay. Why is that word so hard to say? Am I the only one? So it's just a really neat place where it's like a bunch of open houses that take place on, the same block the same day.
Is there to take care of these things year round? It's got to be extremely expensive. Is there a kind of a metric that whatever you buy, it's going to cost you about 5% of the value of that every year to just kind of maintain it, make sure you get everything taken care of, it's clean, it's manned?
Yeah. So there's two things. One is the maintenance part of it. It's just making sure that your boat's good and safe, and that your yacht is in ready to use condition. And that's going to be somewhere, depending on your yacht, depending how often you use it, how old it is, you're looking at somewhere between 10 and 13% of the value of the yacht. And then there's the second thing, which is the use of the yacht. When you actually go use your yacht, how much fuel you consume. Of course, things like food and wine will play into that. And so my wife and I, we don't have a 600 bottle of wine taste, so we're really happy drinking a great bottle of whatever. So it really depends on your taste, and it also depends on your level of service. If you want your crew to be attending to your every need, you're going to need more of them, perhaps pay them a little bit more. So there's a lot of factors there. But if you, just to use that ballpark, if you have a $2 million yacht, you're probably going to be spending somewhere around $250,000 to $300,000 just to keep her up.
That's a good benchmark to know.
How's this changed since COVID? Now I'm excited. I want to go buy a yacht. I'm going to the yacht show. I'm going to look you up, but I'm a little nervous when you said everybody got this idea 2-3 years ago, and I might be late to the party. So is it going to take me a couple of years to get a boat made, or are there boats out there that I can, billionaires are not the most patient people. So talk to me about, timing.
Yeah, so if you want to build a new yacht, you're going to be looking at a few years for sure. The good thing about the brokerage or the secondhand market is there's always something there. Inventory for us as an industry right now is very light. So we did have a lot of people that came into yachting and loved it and want to stay in it, and they don't want to sell their boat. And we're having this thing that's a little bit of a double whammy, where in our industry, demand is coming down a little bit, supply is coming down a little bit. And if you want to buy a yacht, you're going to have to and you want to use it right now, you're going to have to find something that is on the brokerage market. New construction, again, somewhere between 2 to 4 years, depending on the size of the boat. And the stats are pretty crazy. So looking at boats over 24 meters, that kind of yacht metric, in 2019, there was about 400 delivered. 2020 was COVID, like in my mind, that like became a thing when it was like the NBA canceled their season in March of 2020. Right around then is when stuff for our industry just totally stopped and then recovered a few months later. So the numbers for 2020 were just about the same as 2019. What's crazy is in 2021, so we're at like 419 and 20. 2021, we're at 740. So a massive jump. And then the year after, it was really strong too. So there are a lot of boats that are out there on the water because of this increased demand, but there's always a deal to be had. So if you want something, you want it now, you can find it. You just might have to pay a little bit more.
We only have a few seconds left, and before Voice America signs off, we can continue for another couple minutes, but I wanted to thank our friends at Voice America, and you can find this program live every Thursday at 3 o'clock on voiceamerica.com. You can also find it on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and every other place that distributes podcasts. How do we want to wrap this up? I usually like to look toward, now that you've talked to us about the current light inventory and strong demand, I want some future looking statements from Bob and from Julie on where do you think this market is going? Do you think it seems to me rather superheated in Florida generally, South Florida in particular, and South Florida waterfront in particular is the most rarefied. And you two are at the intersection of the hottest real estate market in America, in the world. Can it continue? Because I'm being told by a lot of smart people that it can, that Florida is not running out of room, not running out of money, not running
All
out of
clear on Voice America.
infrastructure. Thanks, Voice America. So let's work on some predictions. Do you want to start? What's the prediction?
I think it's very interesting because, and this is a real quick baseline here. In Pompano Beach, we now have the Ritz-Carlton, Rosewood Editions, and Waldorf Astoria. Those are huge corporations that do a lot of market research and analyze a lot of demographics. They know that people are still moving here. My inventory, just like Bob's, is still extremely light. I have 10 properties that range from $1 million up to the 15 million level. I've handled up to 40 properties personally. So my inventory is the lowest it's been in my career. And that doesn't seem to be changing in honesty. But of course, the market that we're working in is the luxury market. So it's difficult to talk in medium terms. But Bob, I know we're short on time, so tell us what you see this year.
I am very bullish on the yachting market, and not just because of the economics of it and the overall, but I mean, there's two big things that the yachting industry is doing better. One is making boats and yachts a lot more safe and fun to be on. I get seasick. There's a lot of neat things that are happening, even on the smaller boats, like stabilization, to make sure that when you're on the water, you aren't going to get seasick. You're not going to throw up. So there's a lot of really cool things happening on the safety, comfortability part that's going to kind of broaden the market for those that would say, sounds cool, I'm going to get sick, no thank you. Those people are able to use boats a lot more. And then the other thing that I think we're doing a better job of as an industry is dropping the pretense. So it's like, you don't know how to tie a knot the right way, or, you need to take your shoes off here, or only, don't bring a banana on board. All these silly kind of things that our industry has done in the past, we are shedding that. And I think it, again, broadens the audience of people that feel really comfortable and really good about being on a boat.
You want to take us out?
No, I was just going to say the ocean waters are rising, so you're going to need a bigger boat.
I like that.
Roberta, you can ditch that wool sweater and come on down.
I'm in New York,
Florida.
40-some degrees here.
Yeah, that's a good reason to come down to Fort Lauderdale and check it out.
I know. I need my boat shoes. Guys, this was really amazing. I learned a lot, and I'm excited to someday maybe come aboard a yacht. So, one of yours.
For sure.
Visit Roberta.
Anytime.
Real
Yeah,
pleasure.
this
Thank
is
you
great.
so much.
Thank
guys.
you so much, Bob. Bob
Thank you.
Denison, third generation super yacht broker, and regular yachts too, right?
Yes, regular yachts, boats of really any size, and we sort of have a team approach. So the guys that take care of different varieties of boats really kind of specialize in that.
And thank you, Julie.
My pleasure.
This was great. And you
Lot
don't
of
just sell waterfront, you sell all kinds of real estate down
Right.
here. And just Fort Lauderdale, that's your specialty?
Fort Lauderdale and the yachting and oceanfront luxury real estate is my particular niche.
And we can
Thank
find you in
you.
Palm Beach at the boat show.
Oh, yes,
coming up.
I'm going to be visiting Bob and the Denison team
Okay.
at the Palm Beach show. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Thank you, Roberto.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So such a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Bye, Bob.